Jain friends, we all know that the present union government is trying to sell off our public sector banks. But do you know that since the time of nationalization of our banks, not one of our public sector banks has failed? On the contrary, our public sector banks have been used to bail out private banks or cooperatives that have failed. For example, recently the Yes Bank fiasco, it was State Bank of India, a public sector bank, that bailed out Yes Bank. Now, the supporters of the government spread a lie that the public sector banks are not revenue generating. Yes, there has been capital infusion in public sector banks, which is your money and my money, but do you know that over the past 13 years, the public sector banks have generated over 4 times operating profit? However, these profits are being eaten up by the NPAs of the corporates, the very same corporates that will now bid to buy these public sector banks. So the ones who created this mess are going to go and bid for these public sector banks. And the banking industry is an absolutely open industry. So any corporate who wants to open a bank, all that corporate has to do is go to the RBI, follow the guidelines, and they can start their own banks. Then why do they want to take over public sector banks? If these banks are in a profit, which they are, as I told you earlier, then why does the government want to sell it? And if they are in a loss, why do the corporates want to buy it? The fact of the matter is, every single scheme, banking success story that the government tom-toms about, for example, Jan Dhan Yojana, Mudra Loan Yojana, 90% of those targets have been achieved by public sector banks. And 80% of India banks with the 12 public sector banks, despite the fact that there are about 47 foreign banks, 22 private banks, and over 1,500 cooperative banks. It is in public sector banks that we trust. And therefore, it is important that we stand up and not allow the government to sell off these assets of India, because it will lead to a bigger disaster than demonetization. I am Tehseen Poonawalla. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.